make Android devices more accessible. So without wasting any more time, I'll just stop sharing my screen and pass you over to Sandy. Thank you, Sandy.
Okay, hi everybody. As Paul said, my name's Sandy. I work for an organisation called CARE, who are based in the east of Ireland. And we work with, I think, nearly 500 people who have, it depends what country and as to what you call it, but a cognitive disability, intellectual disability, learning disability, of varying needs. I suppose a tiny bit of just how I ended up where I am. My background is as a support worker, and I worked in residential and day services, and probably in the early 2000s, started my journey using technology with people, mainly because I was kind of somewhat dismayed at trying to do things in terms of person-centered planning and finding how bad that was for working with people who maybe didn't use speech as their main form of communication. Started down the road then and haven't kind of come up from a breath since, really. Okay, today is around accessibility on Android. The past 10 years or so have really seen a huge rise in the use of mobile devices, both in terms of our personal use and for assistive technology. And certainly in care, we found that COVID, in the last couple of years, really increased the number of people who had their own devices. And many times those devices were Android, largely, I think, because Android is maybe a bit cheaper than Apple, shall we say. And people were using or do use their devices for employment, for organizing themselves, to-do lists and things like that, for entertainment purposes, and also for keeping in touch with their peers, their friends, their family. But one of the real issues that kind of come across is that people quite often would rely on support, their family or team supporting them, staff supporting them to use their devices to some degree or another, whether it be through the fact that their literacy isn't very good or they have issues with understanding the device, cognitive issues. Quite a few people we support, and their speech is quite unclear. So things, standard things you might try, like speech to text, don't work very well because Google Assistant or Alexa, whoever, can't quite understand what somebody's saying. And also there's the physical side of things. I'll talk a bit more about that in a while, but what actually defines a tap on a screen? Is it half a second? Is it a third of a second? Is it 1 second? What's a long tap? What's a swipe? And depending on people's physical needs, that their variation on a tap can mean that a device doesn't quite work for them or not. So that's one of the things that I do is try and make it so that the device will work with how they interact with it. It's really around a search to do two things. So one is around customizing and simplifying the interface, making it something that's easier for somebody to use. The other thing is reducing the number of steps it takes to do something. I don't know if you've ever counted, you probably haven't. It's not something we tend to do, but I think to send a text message on a phone, depending on the phone, it's somewhere around 12 separate steps, if you actually count them all up. that can be quite a lot for some people. So reducing those steps down to you know, a couple or 3 maybe makes it a bit easier. And what I'm going to mention the main couple of things I use in a second. What we're really doing with those is individualizing the device to suit the person's needs, and doing that a bit more so than you can do. I mean, Android has some pretty good built-in accessibility kind of options, and sometimes they work quite well for people, but sometimes they don't, and we need to go a little bit further and individualize things, personalize things a little bit more than either the inbuilt Android accessibility or some of the ready available apps can do. Just quickly, and Paul will put a couple of links for these apps in the chat window, so you can you know, go and look at them later on. There's 2 main apps I use. They're not the only ones that do this sort of stuff, but they're 2 of the kind of sort of top of the pile kind of ones that a lot of people will use for different things, and they give really good customization options, which means we can do that whole individualization thing that I was talking about a second ago. So the first app is one called KWGT Custom Widgets. A widget is just one of those things on, I'm sure if you set up a phone, an Android phone, and it has this weather thing that you normally, well, I don't know, I normally get rid of it fairly quickly, but that's a widget. It's a free app. It does have a paid version, but to be honest, with the stuff that I do, I don't need the features of the paid one. It is ad supported, but these ads are not invasive, and they're just in the setup page, so that people that I'm working with don't ever see that, you know, they're not bothered by the ads. And essentially what it enables you to do is set up custom buttons on the kind of home screen of the device, which I'll show you in a minute or 2. And you can set those up with pictures, you can set them up with text, or both if you want, and they can be used to trigger various actions. And again, show you some examples in a minute or 2. The other app that I use a lot, which is really the keys to the kingdom, is an app called Tasker. It's an automation app. It allows you to link lots of steps together into things called tasks, and those tasks do things on the tablet or the phone. Tasker costs a whole €4. I think it's one of the best €4 you can spend for any device, to be honest. You can run tasks manually, which is where the buttons I was talking about a minute ago come in. You can also run tasks depending on various conditions, which Tasker language is called profiles. So for example, you can do time dependent ones, like if it's 8 AM, do this task, or if you've got no Wi-Fi on the device, do this task. You can also use Tasker to make custom interfaces for devices, which again, show you in a second, which are called scenes, and they can be used to really completely customize what the device looks like and how it works for an individual. They're pretty powerful. Tasker does have a bit of a learning curve, but I think one of the important things is that you don't have to be some sort of IT genius to do this. I'm not. You just need to persevere a bit, figure things out, and it's got some pretty good documentation to help you along the way. Okay, that's enough, because we're at time. I'm going to share my screen and show you some examples of stuff, which will just take me a second, because generally I do this wrong. There we go. Okay, we should have make that a bit bigger. We should have my tablet there. Hopefully people can see that.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Paul. Okay, let's start at the beginning. Let's do this one. So the screen we've got down here, we've got a normal size icon. Fine, press that, it opens my app. But if I have dexterity issues, that's really difficult. Could be very difficult. So we can make big buttons. You can make a button essentially the size of a screen for a device. And now this is when it doesn't work. When I press that, of course it doesn't. There we go, it does. It opens, and of course it opens Tasker because that's the app I'm always using. So it opens Tasker for me. Essentially what we're doing here is using this button. You can open an app. You can open, let's do another one in a second. You can open a file on the device itself, so a video or a PDF, for example. So if we've used these sometimes with people who maybe are in supported employment, and the support staff are kind of fading out slowly, but somebody just wants something on their phone to help them with certain things, help them remember how to do certain things. So this is an example of that. So we've got a photocopier here, and if I tap that, again, give it another go. It'll take a second. There we go. That's, you might not hear it. There's some sound there going a bit quietly, but that's opening a tutorial how to work the photocopier in the workplace, for example. You can do that sort of thing in other ways with QR codes and stuff, but let's just persuade my tablet to get it out of the way. There we go. But useful for if somebody needs to refer to something on their phone, they can do so. What else have we got? Let's see. I mentioned entertainment as something, and that's quite a common one. Particularly for people who find reading a bit difficult. Going onto YouTube, fine, but how do you find what you want on YouTube? Do you rely on the fact that YouTube remembers what you've watched before? You can, but you can also have choice and use a button with an image like we've got here. Not especially my musical taste, but just what I happen to have on the tablet for some of the guys I'm working with. And if I press one of those, there we go. We've got, you can probably hear that. We've got some Coldplay playing. I'm going to hopefully persuade it to stop. There we go. That's an example of a button with just text. So if somebody's got quite good literacy, but the interface is too small and fiddly, you can do things like that with a text-based thing rather than pictures. So this gives us the start of enabling people to have some choice about what they're looking at on a device, or what they're watching, what they're listening to on a device. You can take that a bit further with, I mentioned you can do kind of custom sort of scenes, which are kind of custom interfaces. So you can take that a bit further with something like this, which, there we go. So that's an example of a custom interface made in Tasker. I won't press it because it's going to take 4 years with me streaming and trying to wanting to connect, because what these buttons do is connect to Spotify playlists. So it's just a URL, a web page. Basically, that's how Spotify works. So they connect to a Spotify playlist, and the important thing with that is that it's also set up so it automatically plays when the person goes into the playlist, because you can go into a playlist and then where's that small little play button? That's a bit hard to hit, but this one just, it automatically, you can adjust the URL and it automatically plays when you go into Spotify. Okay, that's a few examples on a tablet. I'm going to, now that will take me a second. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a second. I think, yeah, okay, and I need to get my phone on here to show you some stuff on that, because generally, as with everybody else in the universe, people have their phones not more than 2 inches from their face most of the time. Right, that's connected. And then if I share the, where are we, Pixel? Okay, you should be seeing my phone now. Hopefully I don't get any text messages while we're doing it. First thing I think with tablets and phones is get rid of all this stuff that people may not need. You know, anything extraneous on the screen, gone. Makes it a lot easier. We've got a few examples here. So this is a good example of reducing steps. So if I press the button, you won't be able to see. If I press the button on here, I've heard it saying that is now calling. I'm going to stop it before it starts ringing. That is now calling me on my work phone. So you can have people's pictures on the screen, swipe through, find the person you want to call, press the picture, and it calls them automatically. You can also do, if somebody finds tapping a picture difficult, I mentioned that earlier on. So we can do, I want to do a call. So here you've got a choice of calling me or one of my cats, because that's the only picture I had on my phone. Again, my cat doesn't have a phone, so we won't call her, but this one will call in my work phone. So that you can set up with, you know, if somebody had the dexterity, you could you maybe get 4 pictures on a page, depending on the size that works for somebody. It's just a bit more, it's a bit easier for a lot of people than having to go into contacts, find the person, even if they've got pictures beside them, the pictures are quite small. Bit difficult to do. So it's a way of customizing the interface to enable somebody to make the calls independently rather than staff helping them with it. This one here is a, let me just check. I haven't had any text messages since then, and that's okay. What this one does is when you get a text message, press the button, it will read the text message out loud. Let me just turn the phone up a little bit. And when I press that.
You got a text from work phone. The message says test message from work phone.
There we go. Hopefully you heard that. That's reading the message out loud. Now you can obviously get Google Assistant to do that, but if you don't have very clear speech, Google Assistant isn't going to understand you. The other problem with Google Assistant can sometimes be it sometimes looks for confirmation of what you want to do. And that does that with text and a button or two to press to say yes or no, whatever. And if you're having trouble reading things, that's not very accessible. So there's one way of kind of reading things. You can also do stuff. I've got it set up on this at the moment, getting a bit more involved, where it will read the message and then you can have a choice about whether you want to send a reply or not, and it will set up a reply to that person for you, and you just have to then fill it in, perhaps using speech to text or however works again for an individual. Okay, let me show you just a couple. Oh, we don't have time. Okay, a couple of minutes more before we get to if you've got any questions. I'll just have to go into Tasker to do this. So we've got a couple of things. I mentioned profiles, which are kind of context dependent running of tasks. So we've got one here that will allow me to call somebody using, but it's voice controlled. So for somebody who perhaps has difficulty with their eyesight, if I turn that on, now if I shake my phone.
Say call or phone and the person's name. Speak after the phone vibrates. Say stop to cancel.
Call Sandy.
I will now call Sandy. Calling Sandy.
Again, my work phone's going to have lots of missed calls today. So that's an example of a kind of context dependent one. So that one's triggered by shaking the phone. This is another one which I will just have to edit very briefly because we're on 53. Yeah, that'll do. This one is one to remind somebody to charge their phone. Yeah, that's not going to work, so I've got it plugged in, but I'll show you anyway. It'll be useful to see.
It's time to charge your phone battery.
And now it's not going to continue because I've had my phone plugged into my laptop to show you the screen. But what that does, let me show you very quickly. Where are we? Charge battery. This is an example of a task. Quite straightforward. So this one says the speech that you hopefully heard. The wait is how often it will do it. I've just got it set up for 10 seconds, so it's quick. But normally you might remind somebody to charge the phone once every 5 minutes or something. All it's doing here is getting some information about the battery on the device. So that's one of the clever things Tasker can do is it can query the phone or the tablet and get information about the state of it, and you can then use that for things like telling me I need to charge it. Because what this does is this here is a variable. Oh, this is getting a little bit technical, sorry. But this basically tells me whether the battery is charging or not. 2, is it charging? If it's not 2, it's not charging. If it's not charging, it goes back and reminds me again. If it is charging, which it is because I've got it plugged in, it stops and goes fine. Everything's happy. And that's run by setting what level. So if if my battery gets down to 20% or whatever, it'll run. So again, a context dependent thing that will run automatically in the background, providing it's turned on, obviously. And that is basically it. I know it's kind of 20 minutes goes past extremely fast, but that's basically that's kind of the way that I work with Android and do things and try and make it easier for people to understand. So I have no idea if there are any questions or anything.
There's not yet, but could I suggest if anybody does have any questions, put your hand up and or type something into the chat. So Jane Rondeau is saying, is there a similar app like Tasker for the iPad?
I knew somebody would ask that one. The short answer, no. It's only for Android. I kind of tried. I'm trying to find something that does similar, but I haven't yet. There really isn't anything very like it at all. Apple are kind of they have a little bit. They like a little bit more control over their devices than Android tends to, and don't really. let you give you access to all that kind of good information like battery status and stuff that you can do stuff with. The only way really possibly to do it is getting into programming your own apps, but that's a whole different kettle of fish to this completely.
Yeah, and then Siobhan Kenny is saying, just to clarify, are all those functions completed on Tasker?
Yes. Yeah, that was all done. So the ones on the tablet, the first stuff, that the pictures are done with that custom widget generator thing, but the scenes, so that the kind of custom interfaces with the pictures. So there was one for the Spotify with the 4 people to listen to, and all the phone stuff, any interfaces on that, that's all Tasker.
It's quite. Helen Hans is asking, have you found any useful websites to guide through setting up these kind of accessibility options on Android devices?
I spend a lot, not specific websites. What I tend to do is I meet people, and generally people have their own devices. The first thing I do is meet with people and see how they're using them at the moment, and what they find difficult and what they need help with, and how they actually physically use the device. And then it's really a case of going off and finding out what they're wanting to do, perhaps. And then it's a case of going off, and if I don't know how to do it already, I start Googling, and I just Google, how do I do this in Tasker, break it down into small steps. So you could see that one for the battery, the task had 4 steps. It's like, okay, so I want it to say something, I want it to wait a period, I need to find out the battery level. How do I do that? And if I don't know how to do that, I Google, and there's a Reddit. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Reddit. It's like kind of forums. There's a Reddit for Tasker, and generally when you Google, you'll end up in the Tasker Reddit, which there's a whole load of good information, and also there's pretty good documentation. The developer of the app has pretty good documentation as well.
I've got a kind of related question which came to mind, which is, one almost thinks, is there a library of Tasker tasks
There is.
shared?
There is, and I can't remember where it is. I will check. I think it might be called Tasker.net, but I could be wrong. But there is. Yeah, I must admit I haven't. It's not something I've really used. I just tend to bash away and try and find stuff. You can, I suppose, what is quite useful, and the depository that there is will do this. You can share Tasker tasks. It uses a format called XML, which is a way of kind of describing what you saw on the screen in the task. And you can share tasks. I do it between devices quite often. And that'll be how that does it. But yeah, I will check. I'll email it to you, Paul, and maybe it can go in something or other, because I can't remember off the top of my head.
I see the Tasker app on Google Play Store. It's got a link with some examples which I've not had a look at.
Yeah.
But I guess the Tasker website.
Yeah, the developer's website's a good place to start, and I didn't stick it up. I'll put up my email as well. I'm quite happy if people are wanting to start and needing a little bit of advice. I'm perfectly happy to kind of offer what advice I can. Let me just share that just now, so it's on the screen. Where are we, PDF? Okay, that's my email address. So yeah, I mean, it looks more intimidating than it is, because a lot of the things you're doing are like 3 or 4 actions, and it's really a case of just, as you would do with a lot of people you're probably working with, you're breaking it down you're breaking down things into small steps, and that's all you need to do with Tasker is you break it down. What are the steps? What do I want? What order do I need them to work in? And then you go off and find out, okay, how do I do this in Tasker? How do I do that in Tasker? And you know, it takes time to get used to it, and time to kind of understand what it can do and what it can't do. But it's significantly easier than going off and learning how to program something by yourself, which I do a little bit of, but you know, learning coding is a different thing.
I mean, you can really see just the, you know, even if it's just to create a you know, a set of tasks that are just what you want to do, you know, like call somebody or call the people that you want to speak to.
And that, you know, and that's one line in Tasker.
Yeah.
That's it. It's just call. Yeah. And then you just put in the phone number, and that's it.
Compared with, you know, you know, what could be the challenge of trying to go in into your contacts, navigate your way through. You know, I'm just thinking of all the different challenges that you might have with physical touch, or being able to see the size of the icons, or being able to understand the interface. And so the possibilities of making life just a lot faster, simpler, and more efficient. Very exciting.
Yeah. I will say that I've seen that link with the alternatives to Tasker for iPhone. None of them are the same. That they can do some of the similar functionality to a degree, but not to the same extent that Tasker can do. I mean, certainly worth having a look at if you're using iOS devices, but they can do certain elements of what Tasker can do, but not the whole lot.
Great. Well, has anyone got any final questions for Sandy? Please pop them in or put your hand up. Nope. Thanks very much. Well, Sandy, thanks a lot. That was a complete eye-opener for me. I didn't realize there was such things were possible. And I'm, you know, I'm also thinking of some of the things that one would want to do with Windows and Chrome and iOS.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, Chrome. I haven't found anything good for Chromebooks yet. They're a very closed kind of system for doing stuff with. I mean, they have obviously the built-in accessibility things, but anything past that, I haven't really found anything good. I haven't found anything at all particularly, but like I said, most of the people I'm supporting, probably 90%, are using Android devices. So that's really where my focus is.
Well, there's a whole load of appreciative comments in the chat, Sandy. So can I just also say thank you very much for your time and for preparing it. And if anybody, I guess, Sandy's kindly shared his email address. So if you'd like to follow up anything in particular, then contact him directly.
Yeah, sure.
So thank you very much, and we'll stop the recording and wish you all the best for this evening and for the rest of the week.